Sunday night edition of the Crash the Pond podcast. Jake, we have got quite a bit to talk about. We've been teasing this for weeks now that we're almost through the cold winter months in terms of lack of news, not getting any kind of real news to bite into. Well, we got that in droves over the last week. There was the first round of the NHL draft, and then the day two, which almost took 3 days, what it felt like, and then on Friday, free agency. And the Ducks were a lot more active than what we expected, both for good and for bad, or maybe all for bad or all for good, depending on who you are. So
Yeah,
I hope you're ready because this could be a bit of a giant show here. There's a
Th-
lot to get into.
this is going to be a big one because, yeah, there's a lot to cover. I mean, we were talking about it before we went live, just kind of making sure we had all of our I's dotted and T's crossed going into the show. And this is the most information I think we've had to break down in a long, long time on this show. And that's even with the last episode being the first round, because at the end of the day, that first round podcast, that was fun. But there were two pieces of news basically on that show.
Yeah, we didn't actually have a ton to go off of there, but now
No,
we do.
and it was important. It was one of the most
Yes.
important shows. But I mean, we have rounds 2 through 7 now to cover, and all of free agency frenzy. The Ducks making trades. And rumors abound. Also with certain things the Ducks may do. Maybe an incomplete puzzle right now. So there's a lot to get into and dive into. So we should just get started.
Well, let's get right into it. Before we get into free agency, I think we do need to put a bit of a bow on the draft because although we did do a full podcast on draft night or the night of the first round, the Ducks had a bunch of other picks to make the next day, and we have to talk about them. So let's start with the 36th overall pick in the second round, a guy that neither of us really had pegged as someone that Anaheim may pick. Sam Colangelo, center out of the USHL, Chicago Steel, or sorry, right wing out of Chicago Steel, a program that is just churning out NHL talent. And the Ducks have really been honing in on the USHL pipeline. Colangelo he's not a great skater, but he does project to have an NHL level stride. At least the believers in him will say that. He's got really good on ice awareness, playmaker. He's got tools. He's a guy who could potentially become probably more of a middle six center. I would say that him and Sam Steele are probably kind of comparables in a way, although maybe Colangelo slipped a little bit in this draft. If you look at Byron Bader's star probability model, which we've talked about ad nauseum, but he actually is at a 27% star probability, which is really high. It was the highest remaining star probability on the board when the Ducks selected him. Now, of course, I don't think they're looking at that, but it does show that his production relative to his age in that particular league does bode well for the Ducks. Now, some people were disappointed because there were other names on the board that maybe we had thought would go at that slot. So Jan Mishak was still available. Noel Gunler was available. Thomas Bordeleau, Marat Kuznatinov. So there were names out there, but I actually don't mind the pick because you can never have enough depth at center. And if everything breaks right for Colangelo and he is a key piece of your lineup, let's say 2 to 4 years down the line, it's a solid pick at 36. So what did you think of it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good pick. Maybe we could say there were probably other people on the board that I think both of us would have preferred over Colangelo. But I think all things considered, it's a very good pick for the Ducks. I mean, this is a guy that was one of the leading scorers in the USHL. We've talked about it a couple different times on this show, but the USHL is a place that has been historically underscouted, and a lot of times you'll find gems in later rounds from the USHL as a result. So I don't exactly hate going into that league right away to get your second round pick. The thing on Colangelo is he's actually going to be going to Northeastern this upcoming season. He's already going to Northeastern. So he's going to be playing against some tougher competition right away going into the NCAA ranks, which I think will be very good for him. I mean, he's a bigger guy. He's someone that could potentially become more of a modern day power forward with his size. And I think from a little bit of a human interest perspective, it's kind of a cool story because him and Zegras are really good childhood friends. And I believe right after the Ducks took him, Zegras actually gave him a call and they FaceTimed about it. And there's a picture I think that was floating around about them as kids together. So
Yeah.
really cool that there's going to be that connection. I mean, we've seen that in the past with the Ducks having not necessarily doing that on purpose, but you had it with Comtois and Morand being drafted in the same draft. You have it now with Colangelo and Zegras being one draft apart. So I think there's a cool little interest story right there for the Ducks.
There is, and it is interesting that another name that a lot of people I think wanted the Ducks to target at 36 was Jeremy Poirier, who didn't end
Myself
up going.
included.
Who didn't end up going until the 5th or 6th round, and he was drafted by Calgary. So a lot of teams passed on Poirier, and maybe history will show that all those teams were wrong that passed up on him. But if you look at Elite Prospects ranking in their draft guide, they had Sam Colangelo at 79, and if you look at the overall body of work for him in terms of his physical tools, the big knock, and I don't know why I called him a center earlier. Sorry about that. I said it again. He is a winger, but the big knock is the skating. They have him in their 3 to 9 scale of, when grading attributes, they have him at a 3.5. So a very low grade, but he grades out pretty well across the board outside of that. A 6 in shooting, 5.5 in passing, puck handling, hockey sense, and a 6 in physicality for an overall B grade. So some people definitely had him higher on their boards. I know that Elite Prospects does look a lot at skating and doesn't necessarily view it as something that can totally be fixed. They also believe that he can be a center. Nominally, he's not one right now, but they do think that he can get there, that he's had moments at center where he could potentially drive a line. So I don't dislike that pick. I think that's
No.
It's a bit of a project, but in that range, you could, I mean, it's going to be all over the place.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of it. And the Ducks made a lot of other picks that I think you could label as projects. Did you have anything else on Colangelo?
No, nothing else on Colangelo, but correcting you slightly on Poirier, because 4th and 5th round did not sound right to me. He went in the 3rd round to Calgary.
Oh, 3rd round. I don't know why I thought so much later.
Yeah, 72nd overall.
It felt very late because of how high.
It was after the Ducks' 3rd round pick, though.
Some people had him in the 1st round. And
are you looking at me?
Did you have him in the 1st round?
I had him 27th. I had the Ducks taking him in our mock draft.
I think that they did better than you with their 27th overall pick.
Well, also, in my defense, Jacob Perreault was off the board in our mock draft by that point in time.
True, because I picked him at 22.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. Boom.
So there you go. Well, let's get through the picks here. So in the 3rd round with the 67th pick, the Ducks took a high school defenseman, Ian Moore, a right-handed shot, who where's he committed to next season?
So he is going to be playing in the USHL this year, I think, on the Chicago Steel, and then he is committed to, I think he's going to Harvard the season after, and so he will be joining up with Henry Thrun at Harvard University, not this year, but the year after.
Yeah, and that is a pick that I do like because all the intel on Moore is that he's got the tools to be a solid puck-moving defenseman at the NHL level. That maybe not to the degree of a top 4 guy, but if he turns out to be solid 3rd pairing, maybe even middle pairing, then that's a huge win for the Ducks. And I do like that they're getting him at a point where he could have a really big draft plus 1 season because, U.S. high school is kind of not a weird place to start, but the level of competition there can really vary. So I think going to the USHL, he could end up really being revealed as more of a value pick once he starts performing in a bit more of a commonly agreed upon league.
Yeah, the knock on Moore, and this is kind of what I saw when I put together the quick little hit on Moore when the Ducks drafted him, but he's a talented defenseman, but the issue that kind of he had was he was playing in the prep level, and the issue that happened there was the consistency wasn't necessarily there.
Well,
you could see that he was the best player on the ice, but it's almost as if he knew that also, and so he would take a period or two off and then play the next period and was absolutely dominant and would win the game for them.
And that's something that should probably change once he gets to the USHL because he won't really, I mean, unless he's that good.
Yeah,
I don't really see him being able to do that. So yeah, they did pass up on Poirier there. So they got more 5 picks before that. A guy, my only issue with that pick, even though I think it's a fine pick in a vacuum, they could have had a Jean-Luc Foudy. They could have had a Danny Gushkin.
They could have had a Jeremy Poirier.
Yeah, but I would have. So if it were up to me, I would have targeted with that pick Gushkin or Foodie, because Foodie, although he has his foibles as a player, is such an elite level skater. Most people seem to agree he's one of the 5 best skaters in this draft class. That's just an intriguing center prospect to bring into your organization. Even if he doesn't end up being a center, you've got something there. And then Gushkin, I understand that he's on the smaller side, but he produced really well in the USHL. He's got a very nice offensive skill set, great shot, great hands, great playmaker. That's just another. The Ducks should have probably looked to add a little bit more on that side at that range, but more could turn out to be fine, and it won't matter. But if we're being completely fair, I feel like I need to at least mention who they could have had at that slot. So let's move on to the 4th-round pick, Teemo Nickel. So not a name that anyone, I think, thought of going into this draft, but he is a solid defenseman coming out of the QMJHL, Austrian-born. So if it had been up to me again in this draft, he would not have been the Austrian that would have ended up being taken.
Yeah, needless to say that.
But he does project well. If you look into the probabilities and whatnot, he does seem to have a solid skill set. Again, I feel like him and Moore are a little bit interchangeable in terms of the kind of prospects they will be. Moore is definitely on the upper end of that,
yes.
but Nickel is in that same vein.
Yeah, Nickel's definitely in that same vein. I'd say, obviously, I mean, you could imagine this by him going in the 4th round, not the 3rd round. His ceiling's a little bit lower. I think at best at absolute best, he becomes a 3rd pairing defenseman.
And they're both right shooting defensemen. So the Ducks really dialed in.
Yes.
After a year, surely, of listening to our podcast and hearing us moaning about the lack of right shot defensemen on the roster, they just decided to shut us down once and for good.
Yeah. But so he's definitely more of a project. He's a guy that doesn't have necessarily the high end skill that Ian Moore potentially has. He's not necessarily. I think Ian Moore, we both agree on, has a bit of upside to him because of the level he was at. So there is a higher ceiling, but more of a risk because of that. Whereas I think Teemo Nickel is kind of more so is what he is, because there's obviously development that can happen there. But he definitely is a lower ceiling type of guy.
Sure. I mean, that's fine. And I think that they're just looking to add bodies into their pipeline for the blue line, which that's what the draft is for. Now, a historic pick in a way in the 5th round at 129th overall. The Ducks made their first Russian selection, Artyom Galimov out of Kazan. So that's the first Russian the Ducks have selected since 2009, Igor Bobkov. It's been a long time since the Ducks have selected Russian. Another thing that we harped on in our previews leading up to the draft. So you really like this pick. You have made no bones about it that you love this pick.
I am a fan.
I don't really get it, because Galimov, even though he's been a good player in the KHL and he's had good seasons in the VHL, this was his final year of draft eligibility. He's 21 already, and I'm not saying 21 is old, but in the world of prospects, you're definitely on a different end of the curve, and he hadn't been drafted in 3 consecutive drafts leading up to this. So to use a 5th-round pick on a guy like that is, and I'm pretty sure that there was interest from other teams for Galimov, so it's not as if the Ducks were crazy here to select him, but he's just not really the kind of guy I would be targeting with that pick, because I don't know how much upside there really is once you're in his age range. To be fair, the Kings, who had a great draft, took Martin Chromiak right before the Ducks there, and he's probably the guy that I would have picked had he been available, but he wasn't. Dmitry Ovchinnikov is probably the guy that I would have targeted. I know he's a complete project, and he might never be a player, but he's performed so well at the lower levels in Russia that he's the kind of guy that I think you should take a big swing on in that range. But you really like the pick, so make the case why you love it so much.
So I'm a fan of this pick mainly because I think to me, it feels like an upside play. This seems like a guy that looks like he was passed over during his time, during his previous years, because of him being a bit of a smaller guy, not necessarily getting the opportunities in the MHL or the VHL or even the KHL that he deserved. during his other draft seasons. And basically last year, in his first year in the KHL, put up 23 points in 55 games and won Rookie of the Year as a 20-year-old in the KHL. And so that's pretty significant to be able to win Rookie of the Year over there. And so he's a guy, if you watch the highlight tapes, he's got some high-end skill, got some hands on him. He's playing kind of in all the situations, I believe, for AK Bars. He's their top-line center at this point in time. And he has 7... I mean, he's not necessarily going to ever be a top-line center in the NHL. But that's not where I'm going with this. But I think he has the skill set to be a very good bottom six type center. He's playing in basically, I mean, we both agree the KHL is probably the second best league in the world. And he's putting up points. I mean, he has 7 points in 14 games. If he kind of follows along with that path and stays at about a half point per game, maybe that translates to him being maybe a 10 to 20 point NHL player. Getting that out of a fourth line center, a guy that is a little bit more skilled, that's not a bad thing. And getting that in a 5th round pick even. And so while, yes, you might want to take a guy that's 18, I think that taking him in his last go around isn't necessarily a bad thing. And there's a history of guys, not saying this is who he's going to become because the draft profile is completely different. But you look at a guy like Artemi Panarin, he was passed over and never drafted out of the KHL. And that was a complete miss. Not saying that Galimov will become that, but there is a history of guys coming over and having some sort of impact, making the NHL after not being drafted at all out of the KHL or the MHL or wherever they were. So I think I like this because I think it's them taking a risk in a way that I have not seen the Ducks take a risk. 20 years. The Ducks have, because you mentioned it's their first Russian since Bobkov. It's their first Russian skater since 2001. Since the draft where they took Stanislav Chisov. So It's been a long time. And the reason why is we actually had a little insight, and we mentioned this, I believe it was on the last episode, but Martin Madden was asked about it. And basically he said the issue with Russian players is sometimes it can take longer to get over here. And so with Galimov, I believe Martin Madden was interviewed, and I believe he's under contract for multiple seasons. So he won't be coming over next summer. It would be a couple seasons after that. But I think that it's an interesting upside play. And I like it because it's different.
Yeah. I just think there's a scenario where he just never plays.
Yeah. It's a 5th round pick. The likelihood of that happening is very high.
Yeah.
As in him not playing. That
I like it. Like I like all the things you're saying. I don't know. Anyway, let's move on because we could go on about that forever, and we have a lot of other things to discuss.
Much more important things than 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks.
Well, that's who we are. That defines this show. we will go to bat for any topic, any niche topic. Albin Sunsvik in the 6th round. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. This is a bit of the end of the road for how much I know these guys in this range. I've looked up his numbers and the probabilities.
It's not good.
He might just never play in the NHL.
Yeah.
I'm kind of running out of things to say already. He's playing in Sweden right now. He's just kind of a classic low upside forward. And that, if you want to object to who they could have had, again, it's not like they missed out on a future star, necessarily, but you could have still had maybe some players that are a little bit more interesting in that range that we know have a little bit more upside. So, for example, another Austrian. Hey, what is it with being Austrians? Benjamin Baumgartner. I love Benjamin Baumgartner because he was so good playing in the Swiss league. He is a bit more like a Galimov, where he's maybe a little older. He's smaller. He's not necessarily the kind of player that teams are going to covet and may look at in these later rounds as someone who will just fill a roster spot one day. But Benjamin Baumgartner, he's extremely skilled. He's a very discount version of Marco Rossi, in my opinion. And you could have had that guy. So anyway, I'm not excited about the Albin Sunsvik pick, and that's fine. It's not something we have to spend a lot of time on. And then, when we all thought it was over, the Ducks traded their 7th round pick for next year to get into the 7th round this year because they didn't have a pick. And Jake, which trade? Which was this, the Goodbranson trade?
No. This was just a 7th round pick. It was the Ducks trading a 7th round pick, I believe. Let me double check on it. I think it was the Capitals who they traded with, but it was for a 7th round pick either next year or the year after.
Okay. And they got Ethan Bowen, who again I'm not going to pretend to know a lot about, but I think in the range that they were at there, again, it's the seventh round. There's not a whole lot of names where you can say, oh, they missed out on that guy or they missed out on the super exciting prospect. Bowen does have some interesting numbers in terms of his probabilities. He does compare favorably to not any top six type players, but bottom six forwards, guys who could eventually fill out a roster spot. So
So here
maybe that's positive.
here's the trade. It wasn't Washington, it was Columbus. The Ducks traded conditional seventh round pick and the condition is Columbus will receive 27 or the seventh round pick in either 2021 or 2022. At the time of this trade, the Ducks currently don't hold the 2021 seventh round pick. So unless they trade and get a seventh round pick as part of it to give to Columbus next year, it's probably going to be 2022. I mean, the only takeaway I had from this, there were two takeaways. One of them was that the Ducks must have liked someone in this range, and probably it was Ethan Bowen, and they thought he was going to drop, and they figured, let's get a seventh round pick to take him. But also from a very selfish perspective, seeing as I was cranking out all the articles on draft day for all of these kids, when that sixth round pick happened, I was about to open a beer, got real happy. It was all done for me. No more trade or no more draft picks. All the articles were done. And then the Ducks had to go make a trade, and I had to write another article. So, selfishly...
Jake just flexing that he did a lot of work.
I did, you know?
That's what that was about, which is fine.
100% was. But, you know?
It's fine.
That's what I do.
It is what you do. Okay, let's...
Thanks.
Let's move forward here. Is there any final thoughts in the draft? Any
overall draft grade.
I'd give it a solid. You're putting me on the spot here.
I am.
I would say purely because of the upside that they got or that they're banking on the first round, and if you believe in Colangelo, I would call it probably a B+ draft. I'm not a huge fan of their later round work, but what they did with their top two picks and then with potentially Colangelo, I think that gets them in B+ range. Maybe I could talk myself into A-, but certainly a B+ feels very fair.
That's where I'm at, A-.
Okay. Yeah, and I may even change my grade to A-, but yeah, B+, A- feels right for this draft.
100% feels right.
I'm just not going to let go from my opinion that the Ducks should have gone and gotten
Marco
an elite
Rossi.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
No, that's a fair point.
It's not even Marco Rossi. I mean, you could have had Alexander Holtz. You could have had Cole Perfetti.
Yeah.
You could have had a very interesting, dynamic offensive piece to build around and to supplement a guy like Trevor Zegras, and they didn't do that. And Jamie Drysdale will likely be a very good NHL defenseman. He will likely sell jerseys. He will likely be a fan favorite. I have no doubts about that, about him having a good NHL career, and that is going to be the argument for him. But to me, the draft is always about what is the most you can possibly get to change the fortunes of your franchise, and I just think forwards can do that to a greater degree. They're the ones who put the pucks in the net. And so with a guy like Marco Rossi, that would have been my pick. But removing my own biases, my own view, they did well with their picks. They didn't blow any of those picks, especially in the first round, right? Jamie Drysdale is not a bad selection at 6.
He is not.
If let's say Jamie Drysdale had been off the board and they had taken Jake Sanderson, then
have a conversation
I think
about.
You're leaving a lot of meat on the bone at that point.
Agreed.
And then with Jacob Perreault, who I haven't even talked about yet, that's just an awesome pick. Pure upside. He does have the ability to become that forward that I was just talking about that the Ducks should have been coveting. Now, imagine if they had gotten a Rossi and a Perreault, then oh boy, then we're talking about some interesting things. But that's not what they did. That's fine, and that's why I give them the grade I do.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
Oh, okay. Let's. You ready for free agency?
Let's move on to free agency. Well, we have one thing to hit on before the Ducks actually got into free agency. The day after the draft.
Yes.
The day after the draft, the Anaheim Ducks announced a trade that I think caught all of us a little bit off guard, to be honest.
Caught everybody off guard. So Eric Goodbranson, who the Ducks acquired last season, as you'll all remember, for a they traded him for a 7th-round pick and Andreas Martinson. Sorry, I had to chuckle reading that a little bit. And Eric Goodbranson, who's definitely hasn't had the NHL career that his draft position would imply, had a really good run with the Ducks. He formed a really solid pairing with Cam Fowler, had a year left on his deal at $4 million AAV, and it felt like they were just going to write it out, maybe flip him at next year's deadline, and just kind of have a set in stone top four. And they traded him to Ottawa for a 5th-round draft pick, and so that raised a lot of questions because all of a sudden the Ducks had a glaring hole on their blue line. And well, first off, before we get into what happened after, what was kind of just your reaction to that trade?
My reaction was brilliant. Actually, one of Bob Murray's better trades. One of his better. We can talk about a lot of his trade trees that are a bit of a mess, very sloppy, a lot of weirdness to them. This is one of the better trade trees I think you can find for him with flipping. It essentially became Martinson and a 7th-round pick for a 5th-round pick. Like that, you're getting more value than you gave up. You got Eric Goodbranson, he raised his value, and you got more value at the end of it all. And on top of that, the Ducks got much needed cap relief. Now, my initial reaction was, were they going to use this? Was this done with the specific reason of going and getting an unrestricted free agent? Was this done just to get themselves more cap relief to make a trade? There was a whole lot kind of up in the air, and you even put out an article early on Friday morning before free agency actually even started about who they could potentially target because there was a glaring hole on that right side. And there were some names being thrown out. Sammy Vatanen's name was thrown out.
Yes.
Tyson Barrie's name was thrown out to the Ducks. You had speculated on potentially Tony DeAngelo, who we had talked about in the past. And then there was also Kevin Shattenkirk. And to me, Kevin Shattenkirk was the guy I personally honed in on. I mean, he was a guy last summer, I think, when he got bought out, I think right away I had mentioned, and there were a lot of people that actually disagreed with me at the time, that getting him would be a really smart and savvy move for the Ducks. And actually it came down to the Ducks giving him, I believe, a 2-year offer and Tampa giving him a 1-year offer, and Chattenkirk took a bet on himself.
Right.
He wasn't getting any big money offers due to the fact of him just getting bought out. Witt took a bet on himself, took a 1-year deal, hoping that if he performed better than he did in New York, he would then be able to get a pay raise. And, I mean, we'll eventually talk about it, but that paid off. And, I mean, Shattenkirk's a guy where you could see it last summer if you looked at his underlying numbers. He was much better in New York than he got credit for. He had one bad year there, but outside of that, his underlying numbers were actually really, really good in New York, and just were kind of hidden on a really bad Rangers team. So,
right.
I don't know if you just want to go straight in, but what were your thoughts though about Goodbranson, about that move?
Well, you kind of let the cat out of the bag
a little bit there.
Yeah, you did.
It's hard not to link the two. It's hard not to link the two.
That's fine. But no, what I would say for the Goodbranson trade initially was, even in a vacuum, even if they had done nothing else, that's the kind of move the Ducks should be making. Flip a guy who has some term left, or it doesn't really fit into the long-term projection of the team, and get some kind of future value, even if it's a 5th-round pick. Look, we were talking. Jake and I had a quasi debate about the Ducks' 5th-round pick. If you hit in that 5th round, then it's quite the deal, and so it matters for them to make those kind of trades. So it was a good move. It gave them some much-needed cap flexibility. But just fast forwarding to the first day of free agency, so I actually would rather do this in chronological order, because I think that just kind of, I think it really illustrates the madness sometimes that is Bob Murray's decision-making process.
Before we do that though, let's have a word from our sponsor.
Yes, let's talk about our friends at Manscaped. So support for Crash the Pond is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over their technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience. So, look, guys, women too, when we do our grooming, when we do our thing, there can be some collateral damage. It can happen. And
don't be ashamed. Don't be ashamed to admit it.
We've all been there. Look, I've been there. Jake has been there. Jake's probably been there many more times than me.
Wow.
Due to a lack of precision, but that's fine. this is an issue that is rampant in society, and that's why Manscaped has redesigned the electronic trimmer. The Manscaped engineering team spent 18 months perfecting the greatest ball hair trimmer ever created and just released the new and improved Lawnmower 3.0. Now, their third generation trimmer features a cutting edge ceramic blade to reduce those grooming accidents we just talked about, thanks to advanced skin safe technology pioneered by Manscaped. So, when I tell you that this is premium, I mean premium. The battery will last up to 90 minutes, so you can take a longer shave. It's waterproof, so you can do what you got to do in the shower. I'm going to leave it at that. And I have personally tried it myself. I've really enjoyed it. There's an LED light, so when you're like me and you're trying to, shave your gross neck beard, you can really dial in on that beard line and get it nice and crisp for whether it's a meeting you're going to or a date or whatever. You can look your best thanks to Manscaped. So Jake, what's your experience been like so far with our friends at Manscaped?
It's been fantastic. The blade's great. You can use it all over your body, wherever you want. Comes with a really, really nice little charging stand that you can just have it in there, have it nice, and it actually looks really nice on your countertop. It's not like one of these razors that kind of looks there and it looks all weird. You can just have it nice and docked, and it actually looks really nice. It also has a 7,000 RPM motor. I mean, I don't know what typical razors have, but 7,000 RPMs seems
sounds like
pretty
a lot.
It sounds like a lot. Sounds like a lot. Bring us the dingus chimes in our Twitch that says it is really, really nice. Didn't expect the light to be as helpful as it was. Yes, I second that completely. The light is one of the things where you may think that LED light is not that big of a deal. It's a bells and whistles thing that you don't need. But boy, oh boy, that light is a game changer, and I don't know what I would do without it. So, if you want to get 20% off of your of your order and get free shipping also, use the code CTP at manscaped.com. Your balls will thank you.
Yeah, so to get 20% off and free shipping, use the code CTP at manscaped.com. So CTP, like Crash the Pond, the name of this podcast, and the name of our website. That's 20% off with shipping at manscaped.com. And do not forget to use that code CTP. So, with all that being said, let's get into free agency.
Let's do it.
Freaky Friday is the only way to describe it for me, because it was a wild day. Some bad deals, some good deals, everything in between. So let's start with the bad, because that's chronologically how it happened. And maybe I'm giving away how I feel too early, but the Ducks' first move of the day on free agency, and correct me if I'm wrong if there was something minor before that, the Ducks signed Derek Grant. They brought him back again. I don't know how. I don't know what this is about. A 3-year deal. 3 years for Derek Grant. $1.5 million a year. After having been traded from the Ducks twice, they brought him back again. And Derek Grant is statistically one of the worst defensive centers in the NHL at 5-on-5. Now,
grit, but hard.
He's a good penalty killer. I do want to make note of that. He's a good penalty killer. He wins face-offs, and I know that matters to some people. He was on a bit of a shooting percentage bender last year, and that's kind of what drove up some of his box score numbers, goals and assists. But this guy has very little impact on the largest portion of the game, which is at 5-on-5. And the impact that he does have tends to be on the wrong side of the ledger. So I kind of just lost my mind when I saw this signing go through. Yeah, we were in our Discord chat, which we'll get into later, but the chat just went crazy, because it is crazy to bring back Derek Grant on this deal, even if $1.5 million a year is not that prohibitive, even if you're talking about a fourth line center. It's just the idea behind it. I don't know. Am I crazy here?
100. You are not crazy at all.
Okay.
I have on the screen actually right now for everyone in the Twitch stream or anyone watching on YouTube. You'll be able to see this is the RAPM chart on Derek Grant from last season only. So a season where a lot of people would think he probably was really good because he scored 14 goals and all the different things that people think. But if you look at this chart, you can see basically this is essentially comparing him to what a replacement level or average player would be. Every single thing except for goals for per 60 on the power play, he was worse than your average skater. So even on the power play where he did have some success, The success was mainly just in scoring and actually getting a little bit lucky. But here's the thing on Derek Grant that a lot of people don't really realize, because a lot of people say he scored 14 goals, he had grit, he had all the locker room presence, everything like that. Here's the quick and easy on Derek Grant for me to explain why he is a bad player and why it is not a good signing at all, even though all the Elite 1C memes are great. The Ducks are significantly worse, or get significantly outscored when he's on the ice. They get significantly outshot when he's on the ice. They get significantly outchanced when he's on the ice. All three metrics that you would want to look at, even if you are someone that's old school that doesn't believe in Corsi, doesn't believe in expected goals for, everything like that. If you want to simply just look at goals for per 60, or goals for percentage, was he on the ice for more goals for than he was against? No, he was not. He was significantly not. I mean, I'll pull up onto the screen. Let me see if I can get it. But I'll pull up. It's going to be actually hard for me right now. But I'll be able to get that number to you right now, actually, where he was at last year in terms of goals for percentage. If you bear with me 1 second. But kind of that, this all leads to the point of, so here we go. When he was on the Ducks, he had a 39.8 goals for percentage. Basically what that means is per 60 minutes of ice time for him being on ice for 60 minutes, the Ducks would score 1.84 goals, and they'd allow 2.79. So just by that simple metric, ignoring all the other advanced stats, which are mainly shot-based, the Ducks were outscored significantly when he was on the ice.
Right.
And he was the worst Duck in terms of that. So that, I think, is all you need to know.
It's not good.
It's not. And I think what makes it even worse is this. Let me run through the Ducks center depth for you right now. They've got Ryan Getzlaf. They've got Adam Henrique. They have Sam Steele. They have Trevor Zegras, who, granted, Bob Murray, I believe, mentioned today that he could see him playing on the wing more so to start than at center. But still, Trevor Zegras is technically a center. They now have Derek Grant. They also have Carter Rowney, who is a center. They also...
Okay. Carter Rowney's played mostly the wing in Anaheim.
They also still have David Backes. So I'm not counting Carter Rowney in this, but I'm now at 6.
And Andrew Agozzino.
And Isaac Lundestrum, who granted is over in Europe. But still, there's all these, like, something's got to give. And I had someone ask me, well, could guys like Trevor Zegras, could guys like Adam Henrique, could these guys play the wing? Could Derek Grant play the wing? Well, I mean, the wings are pretty stacked also at this point in time. On the left side, you've got Ricard Raquel. You've got Sonny Milano. You've got Max Jones. You've got Nicolas Deslauriers. There's your 4 wingers. And you also have Max Comtois on top of that. On the right side, you've got Jacob Silverberg. You've got Danton Heinen, technically. You've got Troy Terry. You've got Carter Rowney. There's 4 right there, and that's not even considering anyone that's potentially in the AHL. And so here's the confusion. Where does this fit? The only way that Derek Grant being signed makes any sense whatsoever to me is that someone's got to get moved out.
Well, I think that guy will end up being David Backes. I think that David Backes just doesn't make sense on this team anymore. Are they going to have a fourth line of... What are you going to give up? Like I can't even say it.
Are the Ducks going to give up a first round? Are the Ducks going to give up a first round pick to get rid of David Backes after they just took on his contract to take on draft capital?
They would probably trade him at the deadline, because you can't trade him now because no one's going to take that full cap hit.
But so you're playing 3/4 of the season though with that roster, so it's still the same issue.
I agree. I mean, it doesn't make a ton of sense what they're doing.
And some people will say, well, maybe this was done also with expansion draft considerations because you have to have 2 forwards that are going to meet the 40-70 rule or whatever the hell they make it prorated. But I mean, here's the thing: they're going to have that anyways because they signed Nicolas Deslauriers to a 2-year deal, and it seems like that is with the exact intention of exposing him in the expansion draft for that ruling. Carter Rowney won't be able to hit that, but here's the thing. The Ducks are going to have to leave some forwards exposed. Sonny Milano is probably going to be left exposed in the expansion draft, and he's probably going to play the amount of games. So it's not as if they didn't already have 2 40-70 guys, and Derek Grant was brought in with that exact situation. So it makes no sense. Also, to give him 3 years... I mean, 1.5, like you said, it's not cost prohibitive, but I mean, we made the same argument with Carter Rowney. Like, why give these guys 3 years? These guys
Yeah.
are these guys. Derek Grant is a dime a dozen. You can
Yeah.
you can pick a Derek Grant up off the waiver wire every single day, basically, if someone's put on waivers.
Well, it's also the eternal debate of what should you be doing with your fourth line as a
Well, yeah,
rebuilding
there's
team,
that.
because right now the Ducks are fully stocked with, I would say, below average fourth liners. I mean, you've got Delorier, Backus, I guess, is okay for a fourth liner, but Derek Grant, Rowney, that could just be a bunch of younger guys. I mean, yeah, that could be your spot for Comtois. That could be your spot for Lundestrum. And instead, they are just choosing this route, and maybe that is the route to go and give a guy like Comtois more run in the AHL. But I don't know about you, but I think this could be a breakout year for Max Comtois this coming
I
season,
agree.
whenever that will
Well, and
be. But the problem is, I don't know where the opportunity to break out is going to really be.
exactly.
He's gonna have to go on a crazy bender in the preseason or whatever. Again, whatever that's going to look like to really get a spot in the lineup, because right now Max Comtois is he is trending towards becoming an NHLer, and I don't know if he'll be a star, but he's trending well, and you want to see a guy like that, homegrown, get his opportunity. And the Ducks have just made it so he's got a lot of
It,
bodies in front of him. And, the cream rises to the top, but you also want to give your guys a chance.
it just doesn't make sense to me why you would prioritize getting a Derek Grant back onto this roster. And now I get it. He seems like an awesome guy. There's obviously people out there saying he's great in the locker room and all that different type of stuff. But isn't that the exact reason why they got David Backus also on top? Like, wasn't one of the things they said was, yes, he's later in his career. Yes, we got an asset for him, but he's also going to be great in the locker room for the guys. So it's like, well, what are you doing here? Are you going to just make this whole entire team about having good guys in the room?
Yeah.
Like,
No, Derek Grant's a nice guy. I can confirm.
you can.
I'm not going to go into detail, but I've met Derek Grant, and we had a great chat. He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
But and look, in any company, in any organization, you need friendly people to kind of populate your office, right? And make it a good environment, but you're also trying to win. And so this is, I think, what leads us into the next signing,
Well,
unless you have anything else on Derek.
Real quick, let me just say this on Derek Grant. Heyo Deflo's chatting in the Twitch chat on this. I think it's a very, very good point. If this was a 1-year deal, I think it would make more sense because you could then potentially
I don't think Derek Grant would have signed it if it was
No,
a 1-year deal.
I know, but I'm just hear me
The
out on
reason
this.
he signed it is for the 3 years.
Yes, but I'm saying if it was a 1-year deal, it would be more palatable because you could then go ahead and flip him at the deadline to a contender for draft capital.
But see, this is where the human element does come into play.
Sure.
If a guy knows that that's just what's going to happen again, that's not really appealing.
Didn't that happen with Roman Polak in Toronto where he got traded at the deadline, went back, and then it happened again?
It's just a bit much at a certain point.
Maybe.
Right? So anyway,
regardless.
The thing is that clearly, if you're trying to win now, I don't know how much, even though Derek Grant somewhat fits that bill of a win now guy because he's 30, he's got NHL experience at this point. We've went over why he might not necessarily fit that, but now the Ducks are clearly putting themselves into win now mode by signing Kevin Shattenkirk, who we were just talking about. 3 years, $3.9 million AAV, a really fine contract. I mean, the AAV, I think, is very reasonable for what he brings to the table. He is 31, and there is the fear that maybe his game will drop off, but we don't have any indication yet that will occur. It could happen as early as next season or 2 years from now, but for what we know, for what we've seen from Kevin Shattenkirk, and especially given the great run he had in Tampa Bay, he could have probably gotten a more lucrative deal somewhere else, I think. And I just think that because of the pre-existing relationship with Bob Murray, and I think he's friends with Cam Fowler.
He is good friends with Cam Fowler.
I think he wanted to come to Anaheim, and that's a healthy sign. But part of what the sales pitch was, Bob Murray has confirmed this, Eric Stevens has confirmed this, was he believes that the Ducks, he's tired of the Ducks.
Shattenkirk said that also in an interview.
Like, all parties involved have confirmed this, and that the Ducks they're tired of being where they're at, that they are ready to start competing again for a playoff spot. And so if we are viewing Shattenkirk within that context of a team that is trying to make the playoffs, he 100% gets them closer to the playoffs. Kevin Shattenkirk, as Jake described earlier, has some very good underlying numbers. But you watch him play, you know he's a good defenseman, moves the puck well, maybe not the strongest defensively, but he is a massive, massive upgrade on the power play, and that's going to be huge for the Ducks because of how awful their power play has been the last 3 years. So he makes them unquestionably better in the present.
Yeah.
I am so much more confident that the Ducks can make the playoffs today than I was before free agency started. But the question I want to ask you is this the kind of move that they should be making? Are they at that point where they are ready to start knocking on the door of the playoffs?
So, I mean, it's a good question. I think personally,
Well, one thing I did also want to
go for it.
I did want to add before you go into it. Even if, let's say, you disagree with this contract and you say that the Ducks are not ready to make this kind of move, that they should do another year of rebuilding, his contract doesn't really screw that up.
No.
Because it's low term, low cap hit, so you can still, even if it doesn't work, you're not left with this crazy check to cash, essentially.
Yeah, so let me jump into your question first over kind of what the Ducks should do, and then get into kind of Shattenkirk a little bit more afterwards, because I have thoughts on Shattenkirk that I think are important to relay. But in terms of what the Ducks should do, I think it's tough. It's a very tough proposition because the Ducks have missed the playoffs for 2 years now and have looked bad doing it. And it's not as if, even if you want to go back to the season prior, they got swept. There wasn't, and the Samuelis, no doubt, are probably giving Bob Murray some pressure to win and make the playoffs to get added revenue, especially with the fact that fans in the stadium is probably not going to happen for a while, especially in California. And so there's probably definitely some push from upper management to be able to get the Ducks into the playoffs sooner to get more revenue. Having said that, I mean, this is the conversation we've been having for a while, where the Ducks are kind of infatuated with making the playoffs as soon as possible. And it's almost, what's the saying, putting the cart before the horse or something like that.
Sure.
But basically they're trying to make the playoffs and trying to be a team that just gets in versus trying to make it so when they're in the playoffs, they're contending. And I think that's the key difference here. And we compare them to other teams that are kind of doing that, where the Ducks haven't even, I wouldn't even say they've even committed to a retool or rebuild in the last 2 years.
They really haven't.
It's not as if
they've accidentally done the
it's
rebuild.
not as if Murray intentionally has been bad for 2 years. He's been trying to make the team better. So it's not as if this is a situation where it was 2 years of pain and now they're coming out of it with all of this draft capital and these prospects to be able to lead them. This is a situation where the Ducks, Bob Murray's been a little bit not hypocritical, but he's not really done anything to put. He stumbled into. I mean, Halo Deflo put this in the best way. They've accidentally stumbled into Zegras and Drysdale.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the best way to put it. And I think that's my issue with this is it in the context of Bob Murray saying we're ready to win now. We're sick of this losing, and it's like, we haven't done anything actually to commit to that. You've been trying to just make the team better the whole time and accidentally been bad. And I think that is my issue with that thought process. Having said that, I think that with Kevin Shattenkirk, now shifting this into him, he makes this team significantly better. And I think from an enjoyment perspective, you could argue, and I think the argument I would have against this signing, and we've had some conversations in our Discord chat, different things like that, that kind of there are some people in our Discord chat who don't love the signing, and I get it, because they're of the mindset of the Ducks should be bad for probably another year to get one more high draft pick, and that's kind of what the franchise needs. And I buy that argument. I think that's a valid argument. I think there is something there for it. My counter to that, though, is basically we have to cover every game. And completely selfishly, Kevin Shattenkirk makes this team more fun.
Well, at least the power plays won't just be practicing puck retrievals behind their own net.
And the thing with Shattenkirk is, I have on the screen, and it's been up for a while, you can see Goodbranson versus Shattenkirk. And that's essentially the swap here. You're swapping Eric Goodbranson, who, granted, was all right last year. Had a little bit of a renaissance, even though these numbers aren't showing him that great. These are still better than what he was doing before, which is kind of the crazy thing here. Kevin Shattenkirk is a much better defenseman than that. Much, much better defenseman than that. And I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head. His contract's not cost prohibitive. The Ducks are still up against the cap this year, no doubt. They do still have LTIR in their back pocket that they can pull out. And the other thing is, the last 2 years of this deal, they now have a guy that is going to be locked up on a good deal, and the cap hit for the Ducks in terms of their cap space, they lose a lot of cap or contracts starting next summer. And so having him locked up at a cheaper term for a couple of years is pretty good. Good for this team. And I think he's also a guy that if you're looking and care about leadership and things like that, I think he's a guy that can help out with that in terms of, especially by the end of his time with the Ducks, Jamie Drysdale may be pushing for a spot. And he could be a good guy to mentor Jamie Drysdale on the right side. And so I think there's a whole lot of positives. And I think Chattenkirk makes this team better now. He makes them more fun now. The argument I have against it, or that people have against it, and it's right, is that the Ducks should probably be bad. Some people in our Twitch chat are chiming in real quick, by the way, that the counter to that is you don't want the kids to be coming up in a losing environment. And having Shattenkirk in helps.
Sure. But what I would say is that what's interesting with the Ducks is that if they are really all in on being a playoff team, they didn't really apply that logic to the draft, because the picks they made in the first round in particular they're not guys who project to make the NHL in the near future. Unless they fully believe Jamie Drysdale can make the jump sooner rather than later, which doesn't seem to hold up now that they've signed Kevin Shattenkirk. You're banking on guys who are going to be on your team probably 3 years from now. If they were fully all in on win now, I hate to say it again, but the pick at 6 is probably not Jamie Drysdale. It's probably like a Marco Rossi, right? And so I do kind of appreciate the fact that when it came down to the draft, they weren't maybe bullied into going for a more short-term pick, and they stuck to taking guys who they think project the best long-term. So I do commend them for that. And yeah, I think that it won't hurt for the Ducks to be a bit more competitive in the short term. Let's go over the roster a little bit, unless you have more to say on Shattenkirk.
Let me just show this real quick. So last year, now up on the screen is power play, RIPM, and you can see just from this is over the last 3 years. But if I were to go to just last year alone, Cam Fowler, I think we can both agree, was the Ducks' number one power play defenseman last year. You can see just wasn't there for him. Cam Fowler just isn't that number one guy for the power play. And Kevin Shattenkirk is. And granted,
he's great.
Granted, Kevin Shattenkirk is very good. Kevin Shattenkirk and Tampa Bay Lightning were a very, very good team. But even if I do this over a multi-season, you can see that even in New York, Shattenkirk was pretty good. So the one that's on the screen now combines the past 3 seasons. So it's not just during his time in Tampa. So I think that there's a whole lot of positives in the Shattenkirk signing. I think it's going to make them a lot better. I think that the Shattenkirk deal this is probably the best Ducks defense, and we'll get into that more as we look at the roster. This is probably the best Ducks defense that they've had in a couple of years.
Well, so let's get into it.
Real quick, one more thing, because it was asked in our Twitch chat about expansion draft with Shattenkirk. Shattenkirk, the fact that this is a 3-year deal means that he can be exposed and will hit the 40-70 rule if he is exposed. I expect that to be the case. It sounds like he has a no trade clause is what people are putting in the Twitch chat. I'm not.
He does.
He does. It's not a full NMC though, so he can get moved.
Yeah, it doesn't affect his standing.
Expansion draft.
Yeah. So let's talk about this roster, because it has changed a little bit. So do you want to let's start with the blue line, since that's what's the most directly impacted here. So if you're Dallas Eakins and you're coming up with these pairings, are you sticking with Lindholm and Manson as a pairing?
I think so.
Okay, so you go Lindholm, Manson, first pairing?
I think you have to, because, I mean, they have the history together. They're the guys that have worked so well together in the past. We've seen Josh Manson with Cam Fowler, and for whatever reason, it just didn't work. Who knows what it was, if it was just from the time. I believe it was Carlisle that did it, so it could have just been a Carlisle thing, but I mean, we have enough sample size with Lindholm Manson to know that works, and I would just keep it there.
Yeah, so I think that it's a good place to start. You kind of get a freebie there. And then your second pairing, I think it's got to be Fowler Shattenkirk, right? I don't think there's much debate there.
Yeah.
How do you see that pairing shaking out? Because to me, Shattenkirk is a great 5-on-5 player and has been, at least in the recent past. Fowler, though, wasn't really good at 5-on-5 until really last year. And so I'm very curious to see how those two are going to gel together. Because if the Cam Fowler we saw last season shows up and the Kevin Shattenkirk of the last 2 to 3 years shows up, the Ducks could have a really, really good second/first pairing, whatever you want to call it. Shattenkirk Fowler could be one of the best pairings in the NHL. I could see them really being a solid offensive pairing. And then with Fowler and Lindholm, with Lindholm and Manson, you can really go back to having them just be that shutdown pairing. Or you could mix and match and maybe go back to Fowler Manson and try Lindholm Shattenkirk. I mean, Lindholm Shattenkirk could also be amazing.
Could.
I mean, that could be that. If you want to talk about analytics darlings, Lindholm plus Shattenkirk is kind of it.
Here's the funny thing on Shattenkirk. He's a lot better at 5-on-5 than anyone gives him credit for. And I remember saying this last year also. He's a guy that actually now up on the screen is last season for Shattenkirk and last season for Cam Fowler at 5-on-5. So you'll be able to see he actually was really good at suppressing chances last year and suppressing high quality shots against. And that's something that could be very helpful with Cam Fowler. Cam Fowler last year was great at suppressing shots, but not necessarily chances as much. So they may be a match made in heaven. Now, granted, Cam Fowler had a fantastic year last year. He was, in my opinion, and I think you and I both agree on this, he was the Ducks' best defenseman last year, without a doubt. And so I think those two together could be fun, and they were both good in their own zone last year. And so they may be able to help each other out dynamically offensively, because that was actually, funny enough, one thing that both of them kind of suffered at was being offensively gifted. And defensively, they were both kind of solid. So I think them two together would be a whole lot of fun. It would be a very different type of D pair than we've kind of seen. But, I mean, granted, we say that Cam Fowler was paired with Michael Dozado last year, who's not necessarily known for being this stalwart defensive defenseman. Michael Dozado came up with the reputation of being...
What is Michael Dozado known for?
I mean, wasn't he drafted as an offensive defenseman? That's what he was known for.
Sure.
I mean, that was his calling card in junior, I guess.
Well, the point I'm just trying to make here is that with Fowler, he is a little bit of an unknown, but with Shattenkirk there, I think that, like you were saying with his defensive game, he could actually shore that up a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, do you want to talk about the third pairing at all?
Sure.
Okay. So the guys that I'm projecting right now are Christian Djoos, Jacob Larson, and Cody Curran to be in that mix. Outside of that, are there really any other names that you could see getting in there? Maybe Yanni Hakanpää
Josh
is
Mahura
someone that
also.
Well, so here's the thing. Those are the three I'm projecting, right?
Yes.
Curran, Larson, and Djoos. But here are another three names that could, in theory, be in that mix. Josh Mahura, Yanni Hakanpää, and Brendan Gooley. So that's three additional guys. Now, I would put Mahura probably on the lower end of that tier, but Josh Mahura is in his last year heading into RFA. So who knows if the Ducks want to give him a bit more of an extended look just to have a better idea of his contract. Brendan Gooley, they traded Brandon Montour to get him. Don't they want to see what they have in him? I mean, he is locked up for another 2 years, but he's already 23. And then with Yanni Hakanpää, I could see him coming up, just doing what he's been doing the time he's been with the Ducks, just back and forth, really. But if it is the three that I'm projecting, which is Larson, Curran, and Djoos, especially if they stick with Curran and Djoos in the third pairing, that could be a decent third pairing. It could be an okay third pairing. We don't really know yet what Cody Curran is going to look like at the NHL level because we've never seen it. No one's ever seen it. But Christian Djoos was fantastic after being acquired from Washington at the trade deadline. Now, we all know the story on Jacob Larson. I don't need to get into it too much. Right now, he's my seventh defenseman in this lineup. But when you put all of that together, Lindholm Manson, Fowler Shattenkirk, Curran Djoos, and Larson as your seventh, or Gooley as your seventh, or whoever, How do you rate that blue line group?
I think if we're talking about 6 defensemen being the top 4 that we talked about, and then Juice and Cody Curran, I think that's a fantastic defense, honestly. I mean, so now up on the screen is the RPM chart at 5-on-5 for Christian Juice versus Jacob Larson. So you'll be able to see that Christian Juice, it's not as if he was significantly better than average. He was better than average, but not significantly so. But if Juice is replacing Larson, Larson was bad.
I love that you have this chart up because for anyone who's in our Twitch chat,
or watching on YouTube, it's bad. It's really bad.
It says it all, doesn't it?
And I think that, honestly, I mean, getting Chattenkirk is a big plus. I think it helps with the top 4, and we talked about it with Goodbranson being better than we thought last year, but Chattenkirk is without a doubt a big upgrade on him. But one of the biggest things for this team is that third pairing of Larson Holzer was so bad last year, and that was one of the biggest holes on the Ducks roster. Was any time that they were on the ice, they just got shattered, absolutely shattered.
And here's another thing that I want to point out. Even if we can say that Goodbranson was good on the Ducks, even if he had good numbers, if you look at the totality of his career, you know that the level of hockey that group that they had on the back end last year, the level of play that they can provide at their absolute peak is just not that high, right? Yeah. You're banking on some guys who have never really done it to bring it. Now, with Shattenkirk in the fold, not only does it push some guys down, like we've been talking about with Juice and Larson, but it gives a guy like Cam Fowler even more room to operate. It takes pressure off of Lindholm and Manson. I can't stress enough how much bringing in Shattenkirk reinvigorates that back end for the Ducks.
Yep, and I mean, here's the thing, though. Like I was saying, that Shattenkirk signing is fantastic for the top 4, but almost as impactful is the fact that you potentially could have Christian Juice and... Granted, we don't know what Cody Curran is, so I think we should make that clear.
There's a lot riding on him.
There is. But if he can just be an average NHL defenseman, having that instead of Corbinian and Holzer as the third pairing defenseman, if you can just have Christian Juice, who's slightly above average, plus Cody Curran being average and giving you some boost on the power play, that third pairing becomes not negative value. Which is a big plus for the Ducks, and that may be as valuable as bringing in Shattenkirk. To be honest, as weird as that sounds, that is as valuable as that.
No, that is a good point by you. I think that it's absolutely true that just not having a terrible third pairing that you can't trust at all makes you a better team by a big margin. So. Yeah, there you go. Jake just hitting it on the nose. Let's talk a little bit about the forwards, though. I mean, I know that they're less impacted by all this. Okay, actually, no. Before we talk about the forwards, what is going on in the Anaheim net? So we obviously know that John Gibson is the man, but Ryan Miller, to date, has not re-signed with the Ducks. Has he retired? Because he's not even listed on the Ducks roster on Cap Friendly anymore. He doesn't even appear as a UFA. So I don't know what's going on there. But right now, here are the goaltenders that the Ducks have in their system signed to contracts. They've got Anthony Stolarz, Ole Eriksson, Roman Durny, and Lucas Dostal. So that's a bunch of guys with varying levels of experience, varying levels of ability. What do you do if you're the Ducks right now? Because John Gibson, as I've said on this show many times, needs a capable backup. You can't just put a warm body behind him and have John Gibson play 70 games. John Gibson's workload needs to be reduced as much as possible. So what are you projecting right now for this Ducks net minding situation?
I mean, it really kind of feels as if it's Anthony Stolarz as the backup. That's kind of where Lucas Dostal is not coming over. Lucas Dostal is
so
he's on loan currently.
Friend of the show, John Broadbent, who Defending the Nest SD, we should check out on Twitter, who follows the Gulls very closely, just doesn't believe that the Gulls would roll with Roman Durny and Ole Eriksson as their goaltenders. But I kind of disagree, just in the sense that there's not really any other options unless they bring in someone from the outside. I don't know. Like I agree with you. I think it's Stolarz or bust right now for the Ducks backup in the NHL.
Yeah, because I'm trying to look up right now kind of what UFAs there are currently available in terms of goaltending.
Ryan Miller.
And I mean, Thomas Greiss is now off the board. Mike
Yep.
Smith has been re-signed.
Yep.
I'm trying to think
That
about
goal. The thing is,
Jimmy.
if the
I guess
Ducks,
Jimmy. There's Craig Anderson always.
yeah.
Corey
But
Schneider's now available.
if the Ducks were really in on the goaltending carousel and really wanted a name to come in, they would have gotten in on it. But you saw that happened really fast early Friday morning. So a Jimmy Howard could be okay. Craig Anderson could be okay. I don't know what they're willing to accept contract wise, but I don't know if I'd feel comfortable with them having Stolarz as their backup. He's a bit too unproven. Maybe you just give him a chance, start the season off with him as the backup, see how he handles it. But that is because right now the Ducks are trying to win, right? So you can't have a liability when John Gibson's not in net.
Yeah, you can't. You gotta have I mean, you hit the nail on the head. You gotta have someone there.
Yeah, I mean now I'm viewing this team as a win now team. I'm not doing the whole, well, how does this project for the future? You need a good backup goalie now if you're bringing in Kevin Shattenkirk. So a lot to be determined there. We don't quite know yet. Do you want to just drill through the forwards?
Sure.
So first line, who projects as your first line for next season?
Projecting first line. I mean, it's probably going to be. I mean, they did a little bit with this of Sonny Milano, Ryan Getzlaf, and potentially Ricard Raquel on that right side. Potentially Jakob Silverberg. You know what? I'll just throw Jakob Silverberg there for now.
So Silverberg, Getzlaf, and Milano.
Yeah.
Okay, second line. Are you going Raquel, Henrique, and
Terry?
I don't know. I think you need Silverberg.
Well, I don't know if this is. If you want to keep going, we can. The issue with this is there could be trades that happen.
Could there?
I mean, we're going through the forward group right now, and we're gonna get to it with the bottom pairing or bottom lines. Is this does not feel like a set roster?
No, I think it's close to set.
Okay.
So on the third line you have Sam Steele. He's your set in stone third line center. Unless something drastic changes, he's your third line center. And then on his wing, you could have Max Jones, you could have Danton Heinen, right? Like that's a plausible third line. Or if Max Comtois comes up and beats out Max Jones for that spot, or maybe that's where Trevor Zegras fills in on the wings, right? But that to me feels like a likely third line for them. And then on the fourth line, we've already talked about it. There's so many candidates, but it could be Rowney, Delorier, Grant. It could be Grant, Rowney, Agazino, right? It could be a bunch of guys. So I actually think that, or Backus is also in that mix. You could make an argument that their forward lineup is pretty set. There's not a lot of moving pieces in there. The only moving pieces are which guys from the prospect pool make the jump full time into the NHL. So Zegras and Max Comtois on that list for me.
Just for Tony, the reason why we have Zegras as a wing is basically Bob Murray confirmed that if he plays this year for the Ducks, it's going to be on the wing.
And yes, but so that reduces us. Like to me, Trevor Zegras is going to be in San Diego. I don't see a scenario.
I disagree with that actually.
You think he spends the majority of the season in Anaheim?
Well, here's the issue, and this is one thing Here's one thing we haven't talked about with this is that we don't know what's happening with the AHL. Bob Murray even said, I guess, in that interview thing that he did that.
Okay, what does that mean though? We don't know what's happening.
We don't know when We don't know when it's gonna start. It's gonna start after the NHL starts. It's gonna start potentially in February. So if you have a month or two where you have the NHL going and the AHL's not, you're telling me that you have your number one prospect, one of the best prospects outside of the NHL right now. Mm-hmm. You're telling me that you're going to let him sit on the sideline and not be playing in games, not getting experience just because the AHL hasn't started. You're telling me that you're going to hinder his development as a result of that.
Well, would it be good for his development to be on the wing?
Here's the thing. I think it would be good for his development to get professional games.
Well, I would prefer to see him in the NHL. I'm not saying that he's not, that I don't want him there. I just look at this lineup and I just wonder, something has to give for Zegras to have a true shot. Now, he may just get into camp, play really well and just earn his spot, but there's a long list of guys who are occupying those spots.
I just think that if the AHL isn't starting for a month or so, because the NHL is now targeted January 1.
Let's assume the AHL will start around the same time. Enough to where it doesn't make a huge difference.
But, I mean, it's hard to really kind of go with that because...
No, but let's say that it were, just all things being equal.
Okay.
What do you think would happen?
I think he probably starts the season in the AHL. But I think that with that not being the case, though, that changes things a lot. And also, I should mention the 10-game... There's a lot of people asking about expansion draft with Zegras, 10-game thing and everything like that. So, expansion draft, let me just hit on this real quick. Zegras is not eligible for the expansion draft. He will be a first-year pro. He is exempt from it completely. As for the 10-game rule, if he plays in 10 games, then this year does not count as an entry-level slide. And that may be the argument for him not playing in the NHL. If he plays under 10 games in the NHL this year slides, and it does not count as a year off his ELC. So that may be the reason. But I think Bring Us the Dingus chimes in with the actual quote from Bob Murray saying it may not start at all because there are 7 unaffiliated AHL teams. Or not unaffiliated. They're not owned by the NHL team. And so they don't want to play in stadiums without fans. Because
I will make. Do you want to make a bet right now?
Sure. What's the bet?
Because you're the one that's always pushing bets on me.
Hey, I'm always for it because it's fun.
Okay. I will bet that Trevor Zegras plays, assuming that there is an AHL season, a workable AHL season, I would bet that Trevor Zegras plays more games in the AHL next year than the NHL.
I think that's fair. I don't know. I'm not going to take that bet because I agree with it.
Coward.
I mean, I'm not a coward. I think the issue is that I think the AHL season is starting later. So that means he'll start in the NHL. I think maybe eventually he'll get sent down and spend more games down there. I
also don't know if he should really make that big leap quite yet. I'm a little less high on the notion that Zegras is going to be an immediate star in the NHL. So I think he's going to need a little grooming.
Here's the better bet: would be will Zegras start in the NHL or not?
Does he make it out of camp?
Just will he start the season in the NHL? Understanding that the AHL could be later.
I'll go with yes.
Yeah,
which again makes our bet not really workable.
It's not exactly a bet. So, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, let's kind of get to it right now. Trevor Zegras could be playing center, though. And you and I heard something that on a TSN radio show, there was mention that potentially Adam Henrique and Josh Manson were in the rumor mill. So, no actual confirmation. But,
yeah.
But I mean, it would make sense. It would make sense with both of them being in the rumor mill.
Honestly, though, it doesn't make sense anymore.
Okay. Hit me with it.
Because if the Ducks are trying to make the playoffs and you trade either of those guys, your chances of making the playoffs get significantly worse depending on what you get back.
That's the key thing.
If you're trading them for just like a lateral type move, let's say a younger version of themselves, then yeah, maybe your playoff chances are relatively unchanged. But if you're trading them now for picks or prospects, if you can forget about being the whole win now narrative, because look, if you strip Adam Henrique from this roster, maybe Sam Steele makes the big leap next season, that big leap that we sometimes see guys make where he does become a legit 2C. But where else is the offense going to come from down the middle? And with Josh Manson, we talked about it with the blue line. If you strip Josh Manson off that blue line, that's another big hole to fill.
So can I give my my out there trade proposal?
The Vince Dunn thing is not happening.
It could happen.
It's not happening.
How does Vince Dunn fit on that roster? There's no way that St. Louis can get that deal done.
No, I just don't see it with the Ducks.
Why not?
Because what are the Ducks going to give the Blues to make this work? Because the Ducks don't have any cap space either.
You can. That is why you move Josh Manson.
These are two cap-strapped teams.
That is why you move Josh Manson. That's why you
need to make 2 trades to get Vince Dunn.
Yeah, do it.
But that's a lot of work.
No, but how much?
I don't see Bob Murray doing this.
No, that's fair. That's fair, and I think that's the argument for it not happening. But here's the issue: are the Ducks better by being creative like this? If you trade Josh Manson for draft capital potentially, for picks, for prospects, for things like that, then you go and you then flip that draft capital potentially, or prospects. Let's say Sam Steele, other guys like that, and you take Tyler Bozak in return along with Vince Dunn. Are the Ducks better with Vince Dunn in the lineup as compared to Josh Manson?
The Ducks don't. Where's this cap space coming from in this scenario?
I just said they move Manson.
So you move Manson to St. Louis?
No, you do a separate trade.
Okay. A lot of moving pieces.
There are 100% a lot of moving pieces, but here's the thing. That's how you get better.
I understand. I am not discounting that you need to do difficult things to improve. The point I'm trying to make is that the Ducks don't strike me. I mean,
you're probably right there.
It took them 2 years to figure out that, hey, maybe we should have another right shot D on our blue line. Or not even figure it out, but just to act upon it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But it makes sense. It makes sense. I will give you this. It does make sense. If you can pull it off, Vince Dunn makes more sense for this team, arguably now and definitely later, than Josh Manson does.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing there is getting those. That's the exact type of move you should be making as the Ducks general manager.
Because you're able to check all the boxes of winning now, and so it makes sense.
So that's
I don't see it happening.
That's to me what I should do. But so we're getting a lot of questions in the Twitch chat. One of them is where, and this is coming from a bunch of different people especially with our conversation about Chattenkirk, and kind of the fact of how one person mentioned we're talking about him as if like the Ducks signed Scott Niedermayer in terms of impact. How is signing a defenseman really going to help this team when goal scoring was the big issue? Let me lay this out there real quick. The Ducks were 4th in expected goals against per 60 last year, in terms of 4th worst.
Fourth to last.
So it's not as if that goal scoring was the only issue for this team.
Well, yeah, this is something we discussed on the draft night pod. Sure, the Ducks needed a goal scorer because they suck at scoring, but they also suck at defending. Yeah. So it's justifiable to go out and get a good defenseman.
And also, kind of, this is a funny thing. The Ducks are better at expected goals for per 60 in terms of their rank than they are expected goals against. They're 23rd in the league in expected goals for per 60, and then expected goals against, they would be, if you're going from the top being the best to the bottom, they're 27th. So 27th and 23rd. So goal scoring, not as big of an issue actually as goal prevention for the Ducks in terms of chances. This is leaving out Gibson from it. So goal scoring is still an issue for this team. Now it's actually the bigger issue outside now that they have Shattenkirk signed.
Well, and I think that Shattenkirk, because of his offensive capabilities, could also arguably help uplift the offensive numbers. I mean, it's not mutually exclusive. A defenseman is not just, he's not ineligible to help offensively either and help those numbers. Just because you bring in a defenseman, it doesn't mean that because he is a defenseman, your goal scoring numbers can't improve either. I would imagine that if you look at all situations, having Kevin Shattenkirk on the team could actually make them a better scoring team. If it maybe not significantly, but to a degree, if you factor in power play.
Yeah.
So am I crazy there?
No, you're not at all. So the issue for this team though, now that is all, now that I would say the defense is kind of settled at this point, maybe there's a move that's made for a guy like a Vince Dunn for Manson, things like no, but I think that's the type of move that should be made. If not, this defense is kind of set at this point in time.
Sure.
The issue for this team is now goal scoring, and that's what a lot of people have asked about is where are the goals gonna come from for this team? And I think that's a really valid question for this team. Personally, there's only one, maybe two, maybe three players where I think you could kind of check in them scoring 20 goals this year. And I think that's Raquel Silverberg and maybe Henrique.
Well, so here's the thing with the goal scoring is that we can't look at goal scoring as this singular thing, because to get to the point where you're scoring a goal, multiple things have to occur correctly and in your favor in sequence to get to that point. You have to recover the puck in your own zone. You have to make a good breakout pass. You have to make a good pass in the neutral zone, make the correct decision when entering the neutral zone. You have to maintain possession of the puck. You have to either decide whether you're going to go to the slot or the point, get to the front of the net, chase a second opportunity, right? We can't look at goal scoring as
True.
this just
That's true.
fixed thing. And so if you look at the Ducks process, their process isn't good. They're bottom third in shot attempts, bottom third in scoring chances, bottom third in expected goals, as you mentioned. So it's not like they're getting unlucky by not scoring. It's the entire process is just lackluster. And so bringing in a Kevin Shattenkirk
Helps with
does
that.
improve your process.
Even if he's not giving you points or goals, he's helping that process, like you're
But
saying.
but this is the point where we got to see if Dallas Eakins can step up as a coach, because he didn't instill a true improvement, a true recognizable improvement in these areas of the game. We didn't really see that last year. And so if you look at the Ducks collection of talent up front, because that's kind of what it is, it's a collection of talent, I think there's enough there to cobble together a somewhat workable NHL offense, if we want to call it that, right? Use football terms. If you can get a decent transition game out of those guys, you've got a Sonny Milano, you've got a Rickard Rakell, Danton Heinen. That the entire point of getting him was he's a better transition player than Nick Ritchie. And now with some additional mobility on the back end with Chattenkirk, as well as a full season of juice, if Dallas Eakins can't get a better process out of these guys, then that's when I would be a little concerned, because now the pieces are there to have some improvement in that area.
Yeah, and so okay, want to move on to some questions that we've got?
Let's do it.
All right, so for everyone in Twitch chat, let's get some questions. If you have questions, start throwing them in. But for those of you watching the recorded version of this on YouTube, yes, we're on YouTube. You can find us going to youtube.com/crashthepond. We do a Twitch live stream each and every podcast. Find us at twitch.tv/crashthepond. If you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime sub each and every month. You just have to hit that subscribe button after 30 days, and you will subscribe to the show, and it helps out more than you can imagine. With that subscription, you get special emotes in the chat, special badge next to your name. And if you don't have Amazon Prime or don't want to hit that subscribe button, if you hit that follow button and you're enjoying what you're watching, you'll get notified anytime we go live. So we actually got cheers from Ducks Go, so I want to give them a shout out. They used 100 bits. One of them was asking us basically about please explain who's going to score the goals, and I think we did a decent job of going over that in the last little bit. And he also said, should the Ducks grab Tyler Johnson?
Well, he would kind of fit what we're talking about here. I haven't really looked into the numbers for him, but I do think that he would make sense. They need another center who can drive play, who can provide some offense, but the Ducks don't have any cap space
or roster space.
Or roster space. So you would have to make a corresponding move to get Tyler Johnson in there. So I don't really know. I just don't see it really happening.
Yeah. Okay. Let's. Bonnie gave us a question saying, are the training wheels off of Dallas Eakins, and will he have fewer controls telling him what to do? Basically, fewer people above him telling him what he has to do.
Well, we don't actually know that.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So if you look at Dallas Eakins last season and just the way that they kind of brought him along, they brought in Daryl Sutter, the legendary coach who led the Kings to 2 Stanley Cups, to be an advisor to the head coach, and he's still there. He still has a voice in the room. Bob Murray is still watching all this unfold. So the training wheels should come off. I think that they do need to find out truly what they have in Dallas Eakins. But I can't really tell from the outside what kind of groundwork is being laid to get to that point.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that it's put up or shut up time for Eakins.
Well, it is. It is. We need to find out if he's a good coach.
Yeah, and I think this is the year where we're gonna have to find out, basically.
Right.
For that. So we've got this question that comes in from Heyo D-Float. Simple question. It's really not that simple. Come on, this is actually a tough one. What is the Ducks' floor and ceiling next year in terms of record/playoffs?
So their floor, I think, is... So floor is just the average outcome?
Floor is the bottom outcome.
Okay. Because in fantasy football, I feel like floor means something different. But anyway, so yeah, the bottom outcome, the worst outcome for them is just, again, same thing as this year, right? They don't get the contributions they were hoping for from the young players. The older players continue to regress. John Gibson doesn't have he kind of continues this bit of a downtick he's going through, and they're picking in the top 10 again. I mean, that is the bottom tier outcome for sure for this team. Now, I think we all know that, though. I don't think that that's breaking any news. The question becomes, what can they achieve? What is their ceiling? So my view of their ceiling right now, I think that they're a first round team right now. If we're being fully honest, right? Even though Shattenkirk changes a lot of things, and if you bake in some improvement from the youngsters, they're probably still maybe a tough out in the first round. I can't see them getting to the conference final.
So let's do it like this. Instead of saying how far they're going to go in the playoffs, where do you think they finish the season in terms of in the Pacific? If the Pacific indeed is the Pacific that we expected, because there's some conversation of
what do we expect it to be?
Well, as in what the Pacific normally is.
So Arizona might be bad next season.
Well, when I said the Pacific in terms of that, I meant who knows what the division alignment's going to be, because there's some chatter that the Canadian teams may just be their own division.
Okay. Well, whatever.
Stuff. I mean, assuming the Pacific is the Pacific.
Yeah. So San Jose is probably still going to be pretty bad. Vancouver, although they had the nice playoff run, they could arguably be a worse team next season.
Yeah.
Vegas will probably still be in that top 3. LA, right, at some point the leap forward is going to happen, but I don't know if it's next season quite yet. Yeah. Edmonton, I like Tyson Barrie for them because they're kind of just doubling down on what they're already good at.
Goaltending is still a massive issue, though.
It is, but they managed to get in this year with those guys. So
True.
I think there's enough firepower there for them to do it again. Calgary is an interesting one because What?
Wild card.
Yeah, they're probably more of a wild card. So my only real lock in the Pacific right now is Vegas.
Yep.
Outside of that, so where do the Ducks fit in terms of this group of hopefuls? I think they're right in there, and I think they could either be a wild card or they could be a top 3.
I could see them maybe getting up to second if all things fall right for this Ducks team. Maybe they're second in the Pacific. So
sure,
if we're talking absolute ceiling for this team, that's where I would put it.
Sure. Yeah, I think second is probably the absolute ceiling because I can't see them dislodging a Vegas, for example.
Yep, I think that anything else you want to add on that? I think that that's a good kind of potential high point for Ducks fans.
And what's funny is that I think this is kind of similar to what we said going into last season.
Yeah, 100%.
But I think now it's more believable than it was last time around.
Yes, 100%. 100%. And I also think you can also look at it in this way. The kids have another year. Potentially that could help with the production push from them.
Yes, we are getting into the range now where one of the kids should pop, should have have kind of that
have a 30 to 40 point season.
That's where we're setting the bar. No, but in all seriousness, that's one of them is going to do that this year. Do you want to make a bet on who it'll be? I just want to get a bet out of you.
Troy Terry.
Podcast. I don't think it's Troy Terry. I think Troy Terry, I've said this before, he settles in as a really solid middle 6.
It's Troy Terry.
Driver.
It's probably Comtois.
I think it's Max Comtois.
It's probably Comtois. You're probably right.
You could argue Trevor Zegras. I mean, you could say Trevor Zegras is that guy.
True.
To me, it's either, and now this might sound hypocritical for me for all the critiques I've thrown his way, but it's either going to be Max Comtois or Sam Steele. I think Sam Steele is due now for his first true NHL performance type season. So we'll see. So factoring in that one of those guys breaks out, which we're kind of treating as a constant here, which might not.
It's definitely not.
It's definitely not. But assuming that we're building that into our equation here, does that outweigh, let's say, a Ryan Getzlaf at age 35 really taking a step back? Let's say.
Well, and this is where I think maybe
this is the volatility.
Why you hope Trevor Zegras plays at center is if Zegras can somehow if he's the one making that step, that takes pressure off of Getzlaf and scoring pressure off of Getzlaf and helps this team depth wise. And that's why I would be looking at Zegras as a center. And
also, we don't know what kind of Adam Henrique will show up next season either, because he had Adam Henrique had a legitimately good
Very
season.
good season. He was the best Duck forward last year.
Yes, but we don't necessarily know if that will happen again. That's the thing. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we've got a bunch, so don't worry about that. And I also have
Oh
one from
boy.
Twitter that we need to get to.
Oh boy.
D Frenzy asked, will Bob Murray be the general manager after the expansion draft? Do you think this last deal was a prove it deal? Because so just to be clear, he is actually signed through the season after the expansion draft, so through next season. So he has this season, next one. But he also adds, or do you think the Samuelis would never think of firing him? Basically, do you think that this could be his last chance? And that's why he's going for it.
I think it's a double-edged sword because I think he is going for it because he knows that he has to show something. But I also think that the fact that he feels this way reveals a little bit about what kind of pressure he's under. I don't think the Samuelis, and again, this is all complete conjecture. I don't know whether or not that this is what they think, but just looking at how he's acting, I think that they want to be a competitive team. I think that they've been really used to that for the majority of their tenure in Anaheim, and I think it really does hurt the business when the Ducks aren't good. We were at games last season, and Honda Center was not anywhere close to packed on a lot of nights, and that's got to hurt, right? Especially in a market like the greater Los Angeles area where you just have so many choices as a sports fan. I think the Ducks, they need to matter to some degree, and you can't have these miserable seasons over and over because you are going to lose people and you're going to lose money, especially in this very bizarre economic reality that we're dealing with. So I think that he's just under a lot of pressure from the top down, and he's just acting in accordance. If the owners were telling him, we believe in a vision that focuses on development and building from the draft, and if we lose some games, that's fine. We just have a vision for this team. We agree with it. And if that was his vision as well, then I think that that's what he would be doing. I think in his own head, maybe that thought has crossed his mind, but he's unwilling to go down that route, and he just thinks that the best way to go for him is to win.
Yeah.
So
yep.
There it is. Maybe owners don't ever think that way. Maybe owners just only care about the bottom line every single year. And if Murray came up to them and really sold them on the rebuild, maybe they would go with him on that. But that's not how I see it right now.
Yeah. Sean Seabolt asked, what has happened to Isaac Lundestrum? So he's actually over, I believe, somewhere in Europe, but I believe Bob Murray mentioned that he is not playing in the SHL, or he's not been loaned, so he has the ability to come back, because if he was playing in the SHL, he would have to stay there for the entire season, or it's something like that. So he has the ability. He'll probably be back in the AHL. I mean, here's the issue with Lundestrum. I think this was one of the first drafts that we probably covered together.
Mm-hmm.
I think was the Lundestrom draft, maybe. I can't really remember.
It was.
And you and I both thought this at the time. Lundestrom was a high floor, low ceiling type of guy, and that's what we're getting from him. He's
we might not be even getting high floor.
No, yeah, fair. He was never a flashy play, and the issue that you have with that is he doesn't have the upside to become a legit NHLer. And maybe he becomes that. I mean, he's still young. He still has the potential to develop, still has the potential to grow. But if he does become that, the floor, it's kind of like what we thought. It's a fourth line, third line center, and that's a high floor, low ceiling player. That's exactly what we're talking about here. And so,
yeah, the thing with Lundestrom is he just, at this point, he's almost proven to not be an impact guy offensively. He will probably play in the NHL. He probably makes it as a depth player. I still believe in that because he does. When you watch Isaac Lundestrom, he has the tools. He's a decent skater. He's got good hockey sense. I think that that's something that you can really get from watching him. But you can tell that he doesn't have the elite shot. He doesn't have the hands really to get into those dangerous areas. But he's a good transition player, and he's responsible in his own end. So I think, yeah, that projects as a guy who does play, but the ceiling, as you just were mentioning, it's probably not going to happen at this point.
Sean Siebel asked, is he better than Grant, do you think?
Right now? Today?
In general.
At 9:35 p.m. Pacific time on Sunday. I think right now he was really bad defensively at some points last season. But when you put him on a line with Silverberg and Raquel, his numbers were amazing. So the thing is, for me, Grant might be a little better right now just because of sheer experience, but I would just be more curious to see what Lundestrum can do in that role, because with Grant, I already know what I'm getting, and it's not really enough for me to just disregard the prospects that are in the system.
Yeah. Yep. So we got this question, and by the way, if anyone has more questions, throw them in the Twitch chat. We'll get to them. But there's one from Twitter that I wanted to bring up. That was from good friend of the pod, William Lewis, who's over in the UK, I believe. But question for the body said, based on the comments from Murray, could the Ducks legitimately contend with only the improvements made so far, so with no upfront scoring help? If you're Bob, so let's just start with that. There's a couple other pieces. Let's start with that. Do you think that the Ducks can legitimately contend with the roster as currently set?
Legitimately contend, what does that mean?
Contend for a Stanley Cup this season?
No.
Completely agreed. They are not as cup contender as of right now. There would need to be more moves to be made to even get them close to that conversation. I don't think that's going to happen.
Even if John Gibson gets back to John Gibson mode, they're not cup contenders.
Yeah. And William Lewis, he also asked, if you're Bob Murray and have one transaction left to make this team a contender, who do you get? Needs to be available and affordable. Don't steal mine.
Well, you're saying Vince Dunn?
Yeah.
I don't think does he really get them to contender level?
Maybe not this year, but I think he helps out long term. I mean, maybe you could argue maybe Patrick Laine, but I mean, you're not going to say that. I know you're not.
Yeah, the thing with Laine is there's just too many holes in his game. But I'm not excited. About
someone
him.
Actually available that's been rumored to be available. I mean, Nylander maybe.
Oh, do you want to hear my home run swing?
Sure, go for it.
This is absolute home run swing, and so much would need to happen to make this work. Like in terms of salary, a guy who has been deemed expendable by his team based on rumors, and reports, and who is on the TSN trade bait list, Steven Stamkos.
Yeah,
I mean, if you get, he is still an elite finisher.
True.
And his 5-on-5 game, he's not really a traditional play driver, but he's fine. And he is one of the very best finishers in the game right now. And he doesn't have the downsides of a Laine. Now you could say, well, just get Laine because he's younger, but I'm thinking about next year. I'm just thinking about how can the Ducks win the Stanley Cup next year, and I think Steven Stamkos gets you a little closer to that. Now, I don't know what the heck you would have to move to get him to Anaheim, but that would be someone where I think, okay, you get him on board. You're clearly, I mean, just think of a power play where at the top of the 1-3-1, you have Kevin Shattenkirk, and on the left wing, you have Steven Stamkos. On the right wing, you have Ryan Getzlaf, who's just dishing out. And then you can have Henrique in the bumper spot, or Silverberg in the bumper spot, and Raquel at the front. I mean, that is an interesting power play. Very interesting.
The issue that I have with Stamkos is he's 30.
Oh, so, well, yeah, but I'm just talking.
You're talking this season. I get what you're saying. We approached that a little bit differently. I approached it from being a contender long term. You approached it from being a contender right now, which is, I think, an interesting comparison between the two of what you're looking at between the two of them. When you're looking to be a contender now, you're looking for the most skilled player at that moment to be able to try to get. Whereas when you're looking long term, you're not necessarily looking at the guy that is the most high profile, biggest talent. You're trying to find the guy that is not necessarily underutilized, but a guy that's younger, that's still up and coming, and that's what you would get with Vince Dunn in that. And so, real quick, I mean, running through the list of players potentially available. I'm looking at the trade bait list, and a lot of these guys are already actually traded. Funny enough, guys like Andreas Johnson. Supposedly Jake DeBrusk is out there. I don't know how positive I am on getting him. Now, granted, he's a fine second liner. I mean, I don't even think he's a second liner.
I think he can play second line.
On a bad team, he's a second liner. On a good team, he's a third liner. I mean, maybe Kyle Palmieri's a guy that would really move the needle a little bit offensively in terms of goal scoring, but that is, once again, a for now type of move and not a long-term move. So yeah, I think looking at this list, I mean, Tony DeAngelo and Vince Dunn are the two names that kind of really jump out at me as two guys. I mean, maybe William Nylander's another one, another one that could have been there. So yeah, and so let's get into it. So I think that's the move. And then one other thing he had is really struggling to see how Murray thinks he's righted the ship. Is there a plan? Please tell me there's a plan. I mean, it seems like there's a plan, but the plan isn't what we would agree with necessarily.
The plan is that they've done enough rebuilding. They have enough prospects in the pipeline. They have the Zegras. Now they have Drysdale and potentially Perreault. And it's time to get back to making the playoffs. That is the plan. I mean, the Ducks have a bunch of prospects. But realistically, you might get 2 to 3 stars out of those prospects at most, right? Yeah. That's just the way the probabilities work. It could end up being more, could end up being less. But they don't have enough to bank on and just say, okay, we've done enough. Time to just get back to making the playoffs. But that's the route they've chosen. So the plan to me appears to be, hey, we have made our picks. We have enough guys that we really do believe in the system. Trevor Zegras is that piece. Jamie Drysdale is that piece in the back end. And we've got enough around those two to really feel good about our system. And we have enough guys in the NHL, look at all the blue liners, look at some of the forwards, where we think we can get back to building a competitive roster. I think that's where their minds are at. And it's not crazy to think that.
You can't will yourself. You can't just put it out there and will yourself to be good in the NHL.
I think that's the thing, is that they are completely overlooking the fact that the Ducks haven't been missing the playoffs just because they've been rebuilding, which they really haven't, by the way.
No.
They've been missing the playoffs because their team has not been that good. The roster has not been that high performing, right? This is the argument that we have had on the show going back to as long as we've been doing this show. Because at first, and actually this is where history has proven me right, it was, it's Carlisle. Carlisle is keeping the team down. Carlisle is the reason that the Ducks can't achieve. And maybe that was true at the time with some guys more in prime age, but we've seen they move to a different coach, and the results have largely been the same. And I just think that that's proof that the roster, there's not enough juice left there to just say, okay, we're going to make the playoffs now. Well, of course, if you inject more players like a Shattenkirk, like a Stamkos, like whoever, you're going to get better results, but that doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden a true contender. And also you're not building for long-term success either.
Exactly.
So, anyway.
Well, let me lay this out there, is that some people would say you just get in and then see what happens. I mean, look at Dallas this year. They weren't exactly this great team. They were 4th in the West.
Yeah, but look at the guys that were driving that for Dallas.
Well, no, but let me just hit this point on it, though, is that when you build yourself, and when we're talking to become a legit contender, you're doing that to give yourself the best percentage chance to win in the playoffs. You don't want to just be in and you have a shot at it. That's not how you want to go about it. That mentality of let's just get in is how you become the Minnesota Wild over the past decade, where you're maybe in the playoffs, so you're with a 15th, 16th pick. Maybe you miss, so you're with a 14th or 15th pick. You're stuck in that mediocrity, and you're not bad enough to get yourself a high pick, but you're not good enough to actually do something in the playoffs. And that is my slight concern with this Ducks roster trying to compete now. And so, like I said, I don't mind the Chattenkirk signing because from a selfish perspective, it makes this team much more enjoyable. From a directional standpoint, I think there is definitely a flaw with it that you can find, though.
Sure. But there's a lot there. We could definitely go on for a while about this, but what are we at? Almost 2 hours now?
Hour 46.
So we're getting up there, but this has been good. We might still be able to hit some more questions. Are there any other questions?
Let me really quickly chime through. Kempafu asks us, if the Ducks end up just as bad as last season, do you think Bob Murray does any dumb moves?
I think if the Ducks are as bad as last season, Bob Murray might be done. I think if they miss the playoffs like they did this year, and they show no true signs of improvement, I think he's out as the GM.
Yep.
I don't, and that's part of what's is stemming this movement of getting back to being good now is Bob Murray's job is kind of riding on this season, and so he needs them to show something.
Yeah, and Bonnie asks us, does Murray try to go the distance as in make the Ducks good because this could potentially be Getzlaf's last year? And I'm going to add a question to that from me. Do you think this is Getzlaf's last year?
Um,
Are we seeing the end of an era this year?
I think he will make that decision partially based on what the team looks like, because I don't think he has aims of being going to another team and chasing a ring. At least that's not what it sounds like. So I think that he's happy where he is. His career, his legacy is set. But I don't know once he becomes a free agent next summer if it will really interest him to sign on for a team that's still clearly far away from being any good. And so, yeah, if the Ducks are competitive again, I could see Getzlaf kind of doing the Joe Thornton thing, right? I mean, that's the comparison that gets drawn year over year. Sign these one year deals, 2-year deals, and go from there. That's probably what I see as the likeliest outcome.
Yep. Let's end with this. It's not a comment. Or it's not so much a question as it is a comment, because I think it's a valid one. It's a very positive thought, and I think that's why after kind of all this chat, I think it's a good point to end on. It's from Apparition, who's been in the Twitch chat. By the way, I want to give a shout out to everyone in the Twitch chat. This is we've been at I think about 30 people in there,
Pretty lively,
which is higher than usual for us for these. So thank you everyone for chiming in. Thank you everyone for tuning in. This has been a really fun one. But the comment is, if you show promise getting in the playoffs this year and you lose, the Ducks then have a ton of cap space coming off the books next year, and there will be a lot of free agents that the Ducks free agents that could be excited to sign with you. And that is one way to infuse new talent. And one thing that also is beneficial, I think, for the Ducks next summer, having all that cap space, is there's an expansion draft coming up.
Mm-hmm.
You could be a middleman and take some players, try to figure out ways to make things work, to take something off someone's hand, to be able to get something for the future to help them get out of an expansion draft bind. So if you have a lot of cap space like they do, that can help accelerate things. And if you have a smart general manager that can take advantage of that, that's one way to get you into contendership.
Sure. One thing I did want to add on Getzlaf, if you look at his numbers, those RAPM charts that we talk a lot about, he's still a good offensive player. The underlying numbers, so in terms of the process, expected goals, shot attempts, he still drives those at a decent clip, but his defensive game has fallen off a good amount, and that might just be age or the way the team is using him, but he's not a great defensive player anymore. On the power play, he's okay on the power play. Last season, the Ducks
now on the screen for everyone, by the way.
They did get a lot of pucks on net with him out there, but the results weren't very good. Now, if you extend your sample to the last 3 seasons, and I think that at his age, you do have to trust the most recent sample a bit more. But if you look at the last 3 years, still a very good offensive player and still a guy who on the power play, I think if you surround him with guys to actually dish the puck to, can probably drive scoring as well. So he's a guy that even if he's on the downward slope, is still a guy who has value to a team, whether that's the Ducks or someone they trade him to. But we might have to start this going into next year, even though I don't know how much we have to do it, but Ryan Getzlaf is still good.
Yeah, he is 100% good. He's not going to be the dominant force he has been in the past, but I mean, you need to adjust your expectation, but yeah, he's still a good player for this team.
And I really want to see Getzlaf's numbers on a good team where he's really committed to the defensive side of the game. Because I think if there's one thing that's maybe waned in his game, it is that aspect of it. But maybe if he knew, hey, my back checking is going to pay off for something, has an end goal, then maybe he'd be doing it a lot more. He seems like the type of guy to make that value assessment in game.
Yep. So I think that's gonna do it. I mean, Nate asked who will join Seattle. My bet's Henrique if he's still here.
That's the most logical pick. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's probably going to do it, though, for us tonight.
Okay, well, what a week. What a week it
Yeah.
was. Pretty unbelievable. I didn't think we'd be sitting here talking about Derek Grant coming back.
Why'd you
I
got to
didn't
end with that?
I didn't think we'd be sitting here talking about Kevin Shattenkirk being on board. I didn't even really think that we'd see the Ducks draft Jamie Drysdale. I didn't think we'd see the Ducks draft Jacob Perreault. So a lot happened this week, and it was really good. It was really fun. If you enjoyed the experience with us, the live stream we did during the draft, the podcast we've done, there's a few ways that you can support that. So one of the main ways is our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/crashthepond. So for $1 a month, the $1 tier, you get access to our patrons only Discord chat. And got to tell you, now that stuff is going on with the Ducks, the chat has been buzzing. We've been, man, the chat, we had a live reaction to multiple signings that the Ducks made that day, and it was a lot of fun. We get really in depth on topics. We just, shoot the breeze. And so for $1 a month, if you are a diehard Ducks fan and maybe you're not necessarily surrounded with other diehard fans, or you're just seeking a community of people who are really into the nuts and bolts of the game, I think that our Discord chat is the place to be.
Yeah.
Now,
Nate says the Discord's lit, and Heyo Deflo said Discord has been fire.
There you go. It's lit and fire. So logical progression there. Now, for $5 a month, you still get access to the Discord chat, which we just talked about and how great that is. But you also get 2 bonus episodes. And those episodes are a little different from what we do here. They are more in-depth on one particular topic. We do look a little bit more league-wide. But if you enjoy the banter of this show, the kind of camaraderie that we have, the jokes maybe, you get a lot more of that on the Patreon episodes. So those are a lot of fun. So that's $5 a month for 2 bonus shows. So that's at patreon.com/crashthepond. Now, a way that you can support the show with no monetary investment, if you just search our podcast on the Apple Podcast app and you simply type in Crash the Pond, there's 2 things you can do. You can type us in, search us, pull us up, and just scroll down to the stars, hit 5 stars, and that's it. You're done. You've already made a great contribution, and that helps us climb the rankings. But you can also leave a listener review, and those serve
They help a lot.
They serve a multitude of different purposes. So for one, we just love hearing from you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these reviews we've got in the past are really heartwarming. When we get a positive review, we do read it on the show. And those really, it's a labor of love for the most part, what we do. So we love hearing from you guys, but also it does help us climb up that Apple Podcast ranking. So it's important. Couple of different ways as well. Jake, you want to talk about YouTube a little bit?
Yeah, so YouTube, if you go to youtube.com/crashthepond, hit that subscribe button, you'll get notified, and you can hit that bell also. Ring that bell. You'll get notified anytime the episode goes up there. Those will be posted on there roughly 30 minutes after we're done with the live stream on Twitch. And if you want to subscribe, that helps out a lot. That is something that we look at, and we have a lot of people watching it, a lot of people viewing this, but fair amount aren't actually subscribers. If you're watching this right now, you're not a subscriber, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you're liking what you're watching. That helps out a lot more than you can imagine.
Mm-hmm. Of course. And what about Twitch? You want to go over that one more time here?
Yep. So if you go to twitch.tv/crashthepond, and if you have Amazon Prime, you get 1 free Twitch Prime sub each and every month. You do have to hit that subscribe button after 30 days. And you will get you will subscribe to the channel. You'll get special emotes in the chat, special banners next to your name, and it helps out a bunch. So thank you so much. Also, want to just really quickly say thank you to everyone that tuned in to our watch along on Twitch. That was one of the best viewed things we've ever done. And so we're glad that we could provide that for you. The fact that it was 3 hours, 45 minutes, the fact that we did 5 hours, I think, of content on Tuesday for the draft.
Yeah.
And there were so many people.
I was pretty beat the next day.
There were so many people that tuned in and watched with us. And overall, last week was one of the most fun weeks I've had doing this in general, whether it was with Anaheim calling, whether it was here.
What did you enjoy more, Friday or Wednesday? or Tuesday, whichever.
Tuesday.
The draft or
I
free
think
agency?
Tuesday, because I think being on air doing all that was so much fun. And
Yeah.
I think being able to hear from everyone in our Twitch chat, it was a blast to do that, and we'll definitely plan on doing that a little bit more in the future with various different things when we can. And so I just want to say a genuine heartfelt thank you to everyone for tuning in, for all the positive feedback we got from everyone. We got people reaching out to us saying thank you so much for the hours of content that you've given us. It was really appreciated, all this different type of stuff. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for the comments, for tuning in, for everything like that, because without you, we wouldn't be doing this. We do this because we like it, but we also do it because we feel like you guys enjoy it. And so without that, I don't know if we would be continuing to do this and putting in as much effort and as much work as we do on it. So I want to say a genuine, heartfelt thank you to everyone out there that's listened, that's gone to the website, that read the articles last week, that listened to a podcast, that watched a video, that did any of that. We appreciate every single one of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to build on what Jake has said a little bit and echo it further, we started this podcast kind of on a whim about 3 years ago now. And
I'm pretty sure I was just a fill-in for you to start.
Yeah, I started this podcast on a whim.
Take the credit.
But yeah, no. So what we've been doing started 3 years ago now, and it was I never thought that I just never even imagined that we'd get further along where we do Twitch streams and Discord, and we have people chiming in and people leaving these awesome reviews. It was just something I wanted to do because it just seemed fun. I love talking hockey. I love just breaking down the game, the moves. And so the fact that you guys have been enjoying that you are giving us some great feedback, that it truly does mean a lot, because this is it's a labor of love. And so it does go a long way. All right. Enough of that. So let's,
that was, we're about 3 years in now. We probably the first
we might, I think November is the 3-year anniversary of the show.
I would assume maybe you might be right. I would assume it's October, but maybe it's November.
No, maybe late October. But yeah, so a couple different ways you can reach out to us here. So Jake is on Twitter at ReindeerGames91. Check out his Twitter handle. I'm on Twitter at Felix_Sicard. Check out the website, crashthepond.com, and at Crash the Pond on Twitter and on Facebook. So, with all that being said, a great week is in the books. Wishing everybody a great week coming up. Hopefully we'll have more to talk about, and we'll talk to you at the next show. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye.